Hey everybody, wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This week's interview is with the magnificent Mr. Caleb Wilson. We actually did this interview before Christmas, but I've only just got around to editing it. I've incorporated a lot of footage of Caleb's YouTube channel. His channel contains a lot of educational bass lessons, which I highly recommend you going and checking out. He's also got a great new project kicking off over on Instagram, so make sure you go and give him a follow. Thanks again for all your support. I can't wait to do more interviews for you, and I hope you enjoy this interview.
My name is Caleb Wilson. I am a bass player and I play bass for CBeebies. Yeah, so I mean, I do lots around CBeebies as well, so it's still your kind of typical session stuff, a little bit of artist work, your more corporate stuff as well, so more like function-based stuff. But within the BBC world, it's more like I get called for different shows or projects. So I do the Christmas shows that they do every year currently. Also got asked to do a series called Yolanda's Band Jam. So I'm the house bassist in that series. It's just been commissioned for a third season. So yeah, we'll see what happens from there. Yeah, so I grew up in a church, typical sort of gospel church. So that's kind of, I didn't really listen to music outside of that until I was about like 13, 14. So that's kind of all I knew at the time. I didn't know there was a world outside of that. I was playing guitar at the time, and my home church was quite small, so I wasn't really playing a lot of the heavy gospel that you hear, but I was exposed to it when we went to other churches. So it wasn't until I picked up the bass at about 13, 14 that I really kind of started delving into any of that. It definitely helped having guitar background. Is just the notes are in the same place, bottom four strings anyway. It's definitely a different role. The two are not the same. If you'd spoke to me at 13, there's no chance I would have been pursuing a career in music. I started on classical guitar at about 7. I kind of then went more self-taught, doing a bit of acoustic, electric. I even played flugel for a short while in a brass band that was a little bit forced, but I'm thankful for it now because it's taught me a lot. And then about 13, 14, our school band had about 8 guitarists and no one to play bass. So I was like, I'll play bass. I picked up the instrument, and honestly, like they say, the rest is history. So bass became my main instrument, but I never had any lessons on bass until I went to study. So at 16, I basically had the choice between going down more sports science or going on a wing and trying the music thing. So I ended up doing the music. I did a diploma course at ACM and then went and did a 2-year degree. And then it's kind of through there that I met all my contacts and was like, wow, I can actually make some money through this. So even then, I think when I went to study, I wasn't really seeing it as a career. When I was at uni, talking to my tutors who were doing it, like talking to Paul Geary, talking to Paul Turner, talking to all the other musicians around, like Brian Henry, all these guys, I was just like this was completely new to me. It still is. There's no one in my family that has gone and done it as a profession. There's a lot of people who may play music but not actually have it as their main source of income. It was a big learning curve for me. It still is. It's the first question I get, and usually the question I get the most is how do you even end up playing for CBeebies? Because if you had asked me 3-4 years ago or told me that that's what I'd be doing, I would have said I wouldn't have even known it was a possibility. Towards the end of my uni, I got a little bit of media work. So I had a very small role in Idris Elba's film Yardie. So we did 1 day of filming in Hackney, and they recorded a bit of audio, and that kind of introduced me to the media space. I'm like, hang on, people are getting paid to play on TV, and I'm like, I want to do more of this sort of stuff. So it was more through the contacts I'd made in that, and I saw a post on Facebook where it was the most vague audition post I've ever seen. It was literally like, looking for musicians of all sorts for a project with BBC, email this person, and it was just a name at bbc.co.uk. So I had absolutely no clue what I was auditioning for. I just went and sent the email with links to like my social media and website anyway, and then the rest is kind of history. So it was just supposed to be one Christmas show. On a weird side note, did that show and got a call a few months later from Justin Fletcher, Mr Tumbles himself, being like, I'm doing a live tour with a live band. Do you want to come on tour with me for it? So I ended up going on tour with Justin Fletcher for a month, like tour bus, everything. It's great. It is great. He is a world-class person. It's the first question everyone asks, you know, like, what's he like in person? Well, he's world-class. It was like, doing this stuff, it's been like the best I've ever been looked after. You know, we get fed well, we get sorted out well, you know, accommodation's nice, tour bus is nice. It's good. All sorts. So we were doing like his kind of classics. Like he's got his version of like Head, Shoulders, Knees and Toes. We've done like the Hello song and all of that, Hello Goodbye song. So kind of like his sort of stuff from Something Special. And then there were a couple more things for like the parents as well. Like there was a bit of Justinified versions of one of the like Dirty Dancing songs as well. Yeah, love working with Yolanda. That's been a really wicked gig that I'm just really happy to be a part of. So there's a lot in it. So basically the show is being branded as like the Jules Holland for preschoolers. So what's happening now is that we've got different bands coming in and different artists and instrumentalists coming in to be guests on the show, where they'll kind of teach the kids a bit about what they do a performance, and then we come together and do like an end jam. We go through all sorts of genres. We go from like Indian music like Bhangra to more reggae influence to more ska to your typical sort of like more Brit rock. This season we've just filmed, we've had Feeder, so we're playing Buck Rogers with Feeder, we've had Maximo Park, we've had the Lightning Seeds, and through this I've even got to play with Beverly Knight, because Beverly Knight was one of the guests on the show as well. So it's a wide range, really wide range. So playing, you gotta be able to pick up on these different genres, and you gotta be really flexible because things change fast. I think for me, one of my strengths has been like just getting on with people. So like it was the producer of the Christmas show who happened to also be the producer for Yolanda's Band Jam on the first season, that gave me the call for the gig. So I didn't know anyone else before that point. If I hadn't have done that Christmas show, I wouldn't have been doing Yolanda's Band Jam. The gig is not just the on-stage recording, it's not just the rehearsals, it's not just the prep. It's like the entire thing. It's the chilling afterwards. It's like, you know, how you are on your breaks. You know, it's are you antisocial, or do you actually go down to the bar after, and you know, when everyone's socializing, are you there, are you present? And just being a nice person, which it's cliche now when you hear it, when you watch a lot of these things, but it makes such a massive difference. You never know what's going to get recommissioned or what's going to get thrown in. Like I could go from one project a year to 5 projects a year to potentially more, or one extended project. Usually the projects will have me booked up for about a whole week to a month, somewhere in between. Chris Banks is actually the one that got me first plugged into it, so big shout out there. They compose a lot for the BBC and different stuff around that. They got the Go-Jetters theme tune and write the songs for the Christmas shows as well. Amongst a lot of other stuff, they accidentally had a #1 hit in Japan, which is crazy. There's something they did for library music just blew up over TikTok or something like that, and yeah, they got a #1 out there. Chris is keys, and Wag, who's other half of Banks and Wag, he's guitar and bass. So when the live shows or like TV stuff is called for, that's then when I may get a call. The band's usually quite consistent. It's Banks and Wag, Ailey on guitar. We kind of like a CBeebies duo at this stage, where usually it's like if I'm doing something on there, she's doing it and vice versa. The Christmas show is its own thing and Yolanda's is her own thing as well. They're two very different projects. Each carry their different energy, but I love both of them. All depends on the project and who the project manager is, who the producer on the show is, but usually it's typically the same MDs around that. In terms of part specific, I think it's a case of learn what's been sent. It's kind of getting into the head of your MD who's written it. Sometimes there'll be parts where they'll be like, no, I definitely want it like this, like play it to this length, and you can get really specific in terms of like note length and how it's played. But then at other times there will be the space to open up, and he will be like open up here a bit. So then it's kind of having something in your arsenal and understanding the context of the music as to what's appropriate. I'm not a slap bass player. I have a bit of it, but it's not my thing. But it's when to know when actually that's needed. Like when you're doing like 70s, 80s stuff, that's often where a bit of that can come out to play. But then there's going to be other times where that's absolutely the complete wrong thing to do. There's one song in this Christmas show coming up, literally for the whole pre-chorus I'm playing one note, eighth notes with a particular stop in it each time. And it was like nailing the stop and coming back in. That was what was getting the MD, was getting Chris loving it. It was only till about my end of first year where I started getting offered like small gigs and actually earning from it, like getting a gig and getting 50 quid. To me that was amazing. Like I was like, I've just been given 50 quid for playing bass. This is wicked. But I was in there like 8 AM to 8 PM just playing with everyone just because I enjoyed it. And then it was kind of one thing led to another, and then here we are. One of my main tutors was a guy called Pat Hughes who teaches there, and he does a bit of session stuff as well. So he kind of helped me really understand, you know, how music works, because I was self-taught up until that point. So I had massive flaws in my knowledge. Like I actually understood a decent amount of theory, but it never clicked. And then when those missing pieces came in, I was like, that's all it is. And that's when it kind of started to click for me. But one of my mentors is Paul Geary, who's bass player for Dire Straits. Nick Kershaw, yeah, he does a lot of different stuff right now. I used to go over to his house and have lessons as well. And then Paul Turner, I had a couple lessons with whilst I was there as well, which is great. Don Chandler's helped me out a bit as well. Don Chandler does bass with UB40, Craig David as well. It's really kind of those people that really pushed it forwards. And then a more current mentor and friend of mine is Sandy Beals, who I think some of you would have talked to before as well, and he did all the One Direction stuff, but he was kind of one that I saw as, because he's in his 20s, not that far in terms of age away from me, but you know, he's had arguably one of the biggest gigs in the last 10 years or so. So I was like, yeah, let me talk to you and see, you know, what this is all about. Gospel music is where it all started for me, like bass-wise, so like Fred Hammond, Kirk Franklin, yeah, old school, kind of more classic gospel stuff, and then bass players like Sheree Reed, Joe Cleveland, more common stuff like Mono Neon, and then Snarky Puppy was probably the first band I listened to that I was like, what on earth is this? I need to find out more. So then through there I kind of went on a little bit of a kind of fusion dive, so I do a lot of stuff learning from like Yannick Gwizdala and Hadrian Farod. It's not my genre at all, but I just like the way that they think. I would like to think it's tasteful. Yeah, I like a solid groove, but being able to drop some sauce when needed. When I was self-taught, I would literally just sit there, listen to music and be like, it's that note, that note, that note. It was a really slow and painful process, but I had no other way to learn. So I kind of started getting good at it. And then once I understood the theory, I could actually break things down pretty quickly. So I'll sit there, I'll be like, I like that idea. What has he done? You know, what chord is it over? What's he using over that? And then kind of make the shortcuts of how to kind of drop it in my playing. So yeah, I'll just try and practice kind of, especially now, more ideas over particular phrases or licks. So in terms of more like concepts, so like using a particular scale or phrasing over something rather than just that particular line, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Context.
Yeah. For me, it was literally just like playing with loads of people at uni. That was most of what it was. Loads of people at uni and church gigs. Pretty much it, up until that point of getting the odd few media gigs and getting the odd little gigs here that were like 50 quid there, 50 quid there. I was playing with like too many bands when I was at uni. There was a time in my first year we do like an end of year performance, and I think I had about 9 bands that I was playing for, and it absolutely drained me. But the experience of playing with so many different people, I was just in rehearsals most of the time, so I really got to know prepping is really important. Actually understanding, sitting in, locking in with the drummer makes sense, getting your tone right for the band also helps, because you can sound great by yourself, and then when you're playing with all the other instruments, all of a sudden your bass tone can either disappear and you're not heard in the mix, or you're like cutting through in a way that is clashing with the other instruments. For me, it's a lot of prep stuff. It's a reasonable amount of function work. So I'm in one corporate band that gets a lot of decent, good paying gigs. That keeps me busy, like medleys, long medleys. So get the charts ready. Also like that sight reading thing has been, I'm not a fluent sight reader, but I can read proficiently enough to get me through those sorts of gigs. Like have the chart, 5 minutes to look through it. So a lot of the time it will be prepping for those sorts of gigs. If we've got new arrangements, it will be a bit of teaching as well. I've got about 5 or 6 private students, and then I go into my old secondary school once a week to teach bass. Yeah, so I'm starting up an online bass course there where basically I'm breaking down licks, so like the licks from the gospel guys, from some of the fusion guys, because what I discovered from posting up videos, the biggest question I always got was, do you have the tabs or do you have the notation for this? And I'm like, I just do this because it's fun for me. Like, this is how I learn. But turns out a lot of people either aren't able to pick out what's actually played, or don't have the time to sit there and transcribe it the way I can. It would take them a lot longer than it would take me. So I started breaking that down, and I'm going to be launching a course where I basically drop a new breakdown every week. So it's going to be something like £7 a month, which in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be great. You just get new licks to your inbox every week that you can break down, and then follow it through my Instagram. My Instagram is _C_ between the two. It's kind of essential to have other areas. I've always been under the impression that I would hate to have to go on a 6-month tour to pay the bills. For me, that's not what I want to do. I want to have the option to be able to basically be in a position to turn down a gig if I don't want to do that gig, if there's something about it that I'm not a massive fan of. I think being able to not just rely on one thing has been vital for me, because I did it once before, and if it gets stripped from you, it can throw shockwaves through the system. But then if you've got other stuff going on, it's like you're not completely wiped out. It's like you can actually pull from this other source of income that you've got to keep you going. Right now, I'm on the Sire wave. I think the Sires are amazing I think they're great instruments anyway. I actually prefer the sound I can get out of the preamp to my Fender. I had a Jazz 5 Deluxe. Sound-wise, definitely prefer the Sire. I'm a 5-string player. That's my thing, really. I've got more piano hands than bass hands, so widespread and long fingers, so the chunkier neck works better for me. I've also now got a Mayon's Jabba 5 Custom, but it doesn't come out on every gig. I think it's being a bit savvy to what sort of gig you're doing and what they're looking for. For that, sometimes you can't bring a 5-string to an audition, and I do have a 4 just in case. I don't do pedals because I've got a Moog, so I use a Moog Sub 37. That's been a game changer for me. I know for a fact some of the gigs that I've got purely because of the Moog. And it's like you can get sort of close with pedals and even other synths, but there's something about the sound of the Moog, like just the way it sounds, the way it feels, the way it looks on stage. I think when you come with gear like that, people automatically put you at a slightly different level in their heads. Bass amp, I'm currently TC RH 450 head, 210 cab. I've not needed more than that. One thing I do have as well is Aguilar tone hammer DI pedal. I'm all for bringing as little as possible, so if I can just bring the tone hammer and my bass, I'm there. More so the programming than the chops as well. Like for me, I think the biggest learning curve was actually, still is in some cases, is how to get the sound that I hear in my head or I hear on a track onto the Moog. And I've got a good way of getting what I'm looking for now, but there's still always tweaks about it. So programming the right sounds makes a massive difference for me. I've also found that especially with the synth-based stuff, the room you're playing in can affect it massively, like how it's being EQ'd. You do it through your amp or headphones and you get a completely different sound. So a lot of the stuff I was doing and a lot of the stuff I was learning, more and more like synth bass was on track, and I was trying to emulate it on bass, and I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, I need a synth bass. If I have the synth bass, I'm going to get these gigs a lot easier. So I actually was fortunate that I won a scholarship at the end of my uni, so I got funds to get the Moog. Yeah, with Worshipful Musicians Company. So yeah, they helped me out big time. Most tricky stuff I find is stuff that's been played in on a keyboard and then translating that to bass. It's like jumps in it that I actually really enjoy it because it tests your technicality, you know, your skill level to play outside of the common shapes and patterns. My practice regime kind of is, I'll do kind of standard dexterity exercises. I'll kind of do like chromatic stuff and like linking between 2 chords, but I kind of separate practice from learning songs. There's a crossover, but I think you can get into a rut of you're just learning songs and not necessarily getting any better. For the Christmas show, what's challenging is that we'll have about 6 or 7 versions of the same song. So like short versions, this part's doing this part with a different ending, and then matching that up to cues. You may have 6 or 7 songs in the entire show, but there's interludes that are different versions of that song. Live is a lot more natural for me. It's kind of more where I kind of started. So TV stuff, it's a case of you'll be talking 1 minute and then you get the call for we're filming, so you have to be able to switch on that energy. You have to be able to be actively listening, where you may not be doing anything, you know, they're filming, but you may not be doing anything for like half an hour, and then it's like your part there, so you got to like not mess up, because if with trying to film so many different scenes, it's like you got to be on point for when your call is the call to play. It's like one challenge with the kind of media and TV side is things change quickly, like you can rehearse all you want, have your rehearsals, and then you'll turn up on set, and 5 minutes before you're about to do the recorded take, it's like, okay, we need to cut 2 bars out here or change this ending to that. So you have to, regardless of everything you've practiced, then take that in and be able to change it up. Just because you can play it at home in your room doesn't mean that when you get to the audition or actual gig, sometimes doesn't mean that when that pressure comes in and when you are actually playing live and everything's a bit different, maybe the sound's different, maybe there's a cue you were listening to in the track that is no longer there when you play it live in a smaller setup, you know, can you still remember your parts like that? Most people have a synth bass, have some sort of level of proficiency there. Best advice will be to remember that the actual playing is only half of the job. Like for me, the biggest benefit I've had is actually befriending the people around me, and that's not just the musicians. I think one of the best things you can do is, if you're a bassist, you know, talk to the other musicians, but talk to the tour manager, talk to the venue staff, talk to the producers of the show, the lighting directors, like whatever you're doing. They've all, if they're working in that space, they've got contacts and they hear about what's going on. One of the like kind of more head up people in the CBeebies department I'd met before whilst filming the Christmas show the first time, and I didn't know who it was. I was just being nice, you know, talking, what have you. It turns out it's one of the like head people in the show, in the departments. So that obviously worked in my favour, and it's just being a nice person, you know. I think strong socials is definitely a big advantage, like focusing on being present on social media, you know. And the social media platforms are going to change at some point. Right now for me it's Instagram is where it's kind of popping off for me, and then kind of looking to build my business through YouTube. But it is just about having those links covered so that when people search you, that you come up. This is the thing as well, it gets difficult sometimes. It's very easy to go on Instagram and see all your music mates doing this, doing that, and if you're in a place, because it ebbs and flows, and if you're in a place where there's not a lot booked in at that moment in time, it can be very easy to go on Instagram, look what's going on and be like, right, everyone's working and they're doing this, they're doing that. But it's not the case. It's not the case. No, everyone only posts highlights. So listen, everyone's grafting for their work in some way, shape or form. Foreseeable future, there's some interesting things potentially happening with the CBeebies stuff. I'm going a bit more into like helping with marketing in terms of like growing socials and email lists for musicians and artists, because I've got an email list of over 1,000 bass players at the moment. Long term, I'll probably be setting up some things down that route as well as the playing, because I love the playing. I just don't want to have to do it. I don't want to have to get in at 3 AM to put the light switch on. I do one free lesson a week, so you can just log on to my Instagram, click a link, and then like one person's randomly selected. So I do that.
So thanks so much to Caleb for coming and speaking to me. It was great to meet him, and great to hear about his new project with the bassline transcriptions, which you can obviously get sent to you. So go and give him a follow to make sure you get notified of when that stuff's available. Once again, please like and subscribe to my YouTube content and give me a follow on Instagram. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next interview.